But family feuds took a back seat when Bolsonaro was confronted with a new political enemy.
Brazil's president-elect, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, takes office today.
Lula was elected in 2002. This was a player who not only was a very viable player on the Brazilian stage, but also internationally.
Brazil, for all of its history, had been a country that was built for and controlled by the elites. Lula wasn't an elite. He had worked in a factory, he had lost a finger, he led a union. He didn't talk like the elites. He was a man of the people.
The most popular politician on earth.
But for someone like Bolsonaro, I think it was probably stuck in his throat that someone of Lula's background became president, someone who was a trade unionist, someone who defied the military regime, you know, who had lots of left-wing connections abroad with, you know, socialist and communist parties in Europe and in Latin America.
He's vowed to make the biggest effort a human can make to sort out Brazil's problems.
During Lula's presidency, a massive oil field was discovered in Brazilian waters, helping fuel an economic boom.
For years, it was a basket case of hyperinflation. Nowadays, it's party time economically speaking in Brazil.
In Brazil, the party has only just started.
Eu quero que cresça mais e cresça sempre.
He lifted huge numbers of people out of this suffocating poverty and made some remnant of middle-life class possible.
As the good times rolled, Lula turned his attention to Brazil's greatest treasure, the Amazon rainforest. His attitude to the Amazon was in stark contrast to Bolsonaro's.
Jair Bolsonaro believes in the very traditional Brazilian idea, which dates back not only to the military dictatorship of the 60s and 70s, but arguably hundreds of years, that the Brazilian Amazon is a vast pool of natural resources that are waiting to be developed.
There is a treasure awaiting you. Take stock, avail yourself, get rich with Brazil.
Deforestation had been rampant during the military dictatorship of Bolsonaro's youth. It was part of a policy to catapult Brazil into the top league of rich, industrialized nations.
We are living through a great moment in Brazil's history. 400 years after its discovery, we are taking possession of the Amazon.
For all Brazilians dream of the day when the Amazon jungles will be developed like our own West.
It's part of a long tradition that existed and was very strong under the military, where they argued that they needed to, in their own words, colonize the Amazon.
Lula would do things differently.
A Amazônia é grande patrimônio dos povos que a habitam. Daí, o nosso compromisso de reduzir seu desmatamento em 80% até 2020.
Lula really had this big image of sort of an environmental protector, steward of the environment. Lula really did a good job of controlling deforestation in the Amazon.
A hora de agir é esta. O veredito da história não poupará os que faltarem com as suas responsabilidades nesse momento.
This wasn't the only policy of Lula's that riled Bolsonaro.
Lula's a leftist figure. He believes in leftist ideals, and he believes in giving voice to minority groups.
Sabe, tem homem morando com homem, tem mulher morando com mulher, e muitas vezes vive bem, sabe, de forma extraordinária, constrói uma vida junto, trabalham junto, sabe? E por isso eu sou favorável, eu acho que nós precisamos parar com esse preconceito.
the government of Lula really did transform the lives of a lot of people.
At the end of the day, the LGBT community just wanted to be like any other person that is inside this country, paying their taxes, have their homes, loving their loved ones.
While urban, liberal Brazil reveled in the freedom of the Lula years, there was another Brazil that looked on in horror at how Lula was transforming the country.
As all these changes are happening under Lula, it's not just Bolsonaro who's feeling unhappy with it. Lots of other Brazilians are. It's the Brazil of what Brazilians describe the interiorzão, the big interior, small town Brazil, the socially conservative Brazil, rural Brazil. Many small farmers in particular in the Amazon who don't want to be controlled, who want to be able to do what they like. Many active Brazilian Christians, they want traditional family values. We want people going to church.
With most of the political class enthralled by Lula's success, conservative Brazilians felt largely ignored.
It seemed like the conservative movement in Brazil had been completely extinguished.
Bolsonaro saw his chance.
There was no conservative opposition. There was not an opposition that was defending traditional values in Brazil. Over a third of Brazilians have conservative political views, and there was zero politicians who were aggressively conservative voices, with one exception, and that was Jair Bolsonaro.
Pastoreava ovelhinhas, hoje pastoreiam veados. Quer dizer, o tempo mudou, as coisas mudaram. Então deixa eu falar agora.
Não é
deixa eu falar,
viado, não se usa termo viado.
A man who for decades had focused on a narrow political platform defending the military dictatorship now found a new voice as the fearless champion of traditional Brazil.
These developments allowed Bolsonaro to reinvent himself as a national politician. He'd been a sort of eccentric provincial politician who people hadn't taken seriously. By championing these groups, is much more visible on the national stage. It means that he's got a bigger constituency, a bigger base of social support. He's going to get much bigger pickup on the in media.
In a 2011 interview in Playboy magazine, Bolsonaro set out his stall.
This magazine came out. He gave like this hate speech that he'd rather have a son being run over by a car than see him with a mustache.
You know, he's so extreme that you're shocked to read the stuff he's saying. Quotes that people just don't say about how gay people are overwhelmingly drug addicts, about the famous notorious quote about how I'd rather have a dead son than learn that my son is gay. I mean, this is something that we all remember.
O filho começa a ficar meio assim, meio gayzinho, leva couro, ele muda o comportamento dele. Você nunca teria um filho igual o Felipe, fique tranquilo.
Não, mas posso te falar? Você seria pai do Felipe?
Ah, não.
Você seria pai do Felipe?
Educação não é matemática, inglês, português.
Bolsonaro.
De vez em quando,
Bolsonaro.
Aprender a ser homem.
Nossa. Dá licença.
Felipe!